This is the School Success Podcast, a podcast for school leaders to learn from other school leaders what's working and what's not, and to get inspiration and encouragement, as well as strategies to grow school enrollment, connect with families, retain teachers, recruit teachers, and everything in between. You guys are heroes, and I cannot thank you enough for pouring into this next generation that's coming behind us. My goal is you will take at least one thing away from every episode that you can take back to your school to make it better than it is right now. Please enjoy the School Success Podcast. Hey, School Success Makers. Today we're joined by my friend Phil, who loves working with Christian schools to help them grow and be more successful. Him and I connected on LinkedIn. I was like, I gotta have this guy on because he has a lot of knowledge that I know can help a lot of schools that are out there. So I really hope you guys enjoy this next episode of the School Success Podcast. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the School Success Podcast. I'm your host, Mitchell Slater. I'm joined by a new friend out of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, Phil Puleo, and he runs his own education consulting company named right after himself, Philip G. Puleo, LLC. He's doing some amazing things, helping schools out and helping them with accreditation and things like that. And if you guys ever heard his name, you might be familiar with some of his stuff he used to do, which he used to be the former superintendent of the Christian School Association of Greater Harrisburg, there in, of course, Pennsylvania. So he'll dive into that a little bit. I don't want to steal thunder away from him, so I will actually pass it off to him to introduce himself. So, Phil, welcome to the podcast, sir.
Thanks, Mitchell. Great to join you. Good to be with you. Good to be with your listeners, watchers as well.
It will be a blast today, and I always start out each episode with, hey, if I ever came and visited you in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, what would be something fun that we would do in Harrisburg to really get to know that area that you're in?
Yeah, you could do a lot. You could go down and catch a Senators baseball game. You could go visit the Capitol, which I think it was Teddy Roosevelt, when he visited, said it was the most beautiful Capitol in the nation. And it has a beautiful rotunda. And so we could go visit that. If you want to go 15 minutes down the road, we could go to Hershey, Pennsylvania, and all the chocolate that you could eat, Mitchell. And if you want to even go 30 minutes down the road and you like history, we can go visit Gettysburg. And if you want to go 45 minutes down the road, good old-fashioned Amish country in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, have a lot of great things there as well. So it's a wonderful place to live.
Okay, man, you are within an hour of lots and lots of things, which is awesome. And I know Nate Long, I think you are familiar with him because he introduced me to you. So he was telling me about, he's like in Amish country. And so that's really cool. So, all right, lots of fun stuff to do. I think the Hershey, Pennsylvania, I think I'd have to, if I had to pick one of those, I've heard about it, and tell me if this is true or false, that it's almost sickening the smell, how sweet, and just the constant smell of chocolate in there. Is that true?
Not the entire town,
okay,
but there are certainly portions of it that you can smell the chocolate. Absolutely.
Man, yeah, because I like chocolate. I wouldn't even say I love chocolate, but I feel like if I was like have to smell it all day long, I don't know. I don't know if I could do it, but I mean, I want to visit it, of course. It's one of those things.
Well, when you visit, you'll have to join us at Chocolate World, where they have a ride. It's an amusement ride for which it talks about the chocolate making process. And it definitely smells like chocolate, and they still give you a piece of free chocolate at the end. So.
Okay, sounds like Willy Wonka in real life right now.
It is Willy Wonka in real life, absolutely.
Awesome, I love it. Well, Phil, I'd love to give you some background on yourself. So your background in education, obviously you've been in there for a long time, then how that segued into what you're doing today.
Yeah, absolutely, Mitchell. So I'm coming up on 30 years in private Christian faith-based education. Started in those early years as a teacher and a coach, moved in for 1 year as an assistant to the principal, sort of as administrative assistant, and that turned into an assistant principal role. That school also didn't have a development position, so I started a development program. And so a teacher turned novice development officer. Who would have known, because later on I'd use those skills more readily. Over the last 19 years, I served at Harrisburg Christian School, as the secondary principal and then the head of school. And then the last 4 years of that, I became superintendent of the Christian School Association of Greater Harrisburg. That's for a fairly intriguing job. So Harrisburg Christian School, its legal name was the Christian School Association of Greater Harrisburg. They bought another Christian school. And so there was a Christian school. In the Harrisburg area, we divide up called East Shore and West Shore. The Susquehanna cuts right down the middle. In fact, if it was 1947, it would be the Berlin Wall, because rare do folks cross over the rivers. Well, it's a little bit of an exaggeration, but it's not completely untrue. So there was a school on the West Shore called West Shore Christian Academy, and a school on the East Shore called Harrisburg Christian School. And we had a vision for cooperative Christian education. Right? It's pretty costly to run Christian schools. It's pretty costly to run private schools that don't get much government funding. And so the idea was, could we be more efficient financially? Could we be more effective academically? And could we expand the impact that we had in the region? And so Harrisburg Christian School acquired West Shore Christian Academy. It was owned by a church, Bible Baptist Church in Shermanstown. And how do you buy a ministry of the church? So it'd be like going up to your church and asking to buy the youth group. And so that's a bit unusual. So the legal process to do that was an asset purchase agreement. So buy all the assets related to the school, the desks, the equipment, the sports equipment, the books, but also assets such as the donor list, the student list, the family list. And then we had I think it was 3.5 or 4 year rental agreement with the church. So that's how we acquired. And we spent then 4 years attempting to build a single unified Christian school district. So in our area, most people are familiar with public school districts. They'll have a high school, maybe a couple middle schools, a couple elementary, and they all operate under the same district. Well, that's kind of what we were creating and did create. So they had a single board, a single superintendent, and that's what I was. They also had a executive team, and so policies were the same. You know, we did some unified events like professional development, spiritual emphasis retreats. We worked on curriculum together. So in 4 years' time, they went from 2 separately, completely different Christian schools to operating as a single unified Christian school district. And in fact, because of that, when COVID came in the spring of 2020, we were only in our, I think, second or third year of operating together. But it's because we came together that we were incredibly effective in handling that most unusual circumstances for which to educate students. And so we created an in-person experience for kids. We were committed that in-person was best, but we also created a virtual classroom that they could attend at any time, no matter where they were. And we called it our Windows into the Classroom approach. So same teacher, same set of peers, same books, same lesson, all at the same time, or you could listen to the recording of it. It was a highly effective way of doing it. And I would tell you without a shadow of a doubt, we were effective because we were doing it together. So last year, so it's been probably 13 months, 14 months at this point, I stepped away from my role as superintendent of the Christian School Association of Greater Harrisburg and decided to work independently. Didn't know exactly what that would look like, but I am thankful to God that He has directed me and guided me to a whole wide range of ways I can help Christian schools.
Awesome.
Yeah. So some of the ways I do help them, and we can explore any of these. One school I helped with accreditation. So they had put off accreditation last year because of COVID. This year they were committed to doing it, but didn't have a head of school to lead them in that. So I, as a former head of school, could come in set up the faculty committees, work with the accrediting agencies, prepare for the visit, write the reports, lead the team through the visit, and ultimately get us for regional accreditation. And so I've worked with regional accrediting offices like Middle States, Cognia, CSI. Those are all groups that I've worked with. So accreditation is a big sliver of that. I also do a lot of development work. And so that can be just general development work, coming up with an advancement calendar, working on their annual fund, working on capital campaigns. I just finished up a feasibility study for a school. What I also do is I work in Pennsylvania. We have an amazing tax credit program. So it's called EITC and OSTC. And what it allows individuals and businesses to do is to give up to their state tax liability to a scholarship organization, and then turn around and receive a 90% tax credit back. And so some of these heads of school, they know about the program. They just struggle with finding time to talk, even with their own donors, about the program. So I wouldn't call myself an expert in it, but I am certainly a tax credit scholarship specialist. And I've been to Kentucky. I've talked with folks in Missouri as they launch some of their own programs. I know I have a friend in Ohio. He says, Phil, soon as Ohio passes one, we're bringing you out, because we can go from 0 to 100 pretty quickly. It took us at Harrisburg Christian, it probably took us 4 or 5 years to get our feet on the ground with a program like this. I can help a school do it in less than 6 months. And one school actually went from never participating to actually this past year having nearly $300,000 in tax credit scholarships that they could award kids. So they're pretty excited about what that does to help kids and also their bottom line, since they'll have more revenue to use.
That comes from the government to the school, not like the person themselves like gets a tax credit to their. Explain it, I guess, a little bit more.
It's simple in concept, but it also can get a little confusing. So an individual or business looks at their state tax liability. They can give up to that amount. They will give that money, or they'll write a check in that amount to a scholarship organization. That scholarship organization will get tax credits from the state that they will then award to that donor up to 90% of the contribution they made. So let's say they have $1,000 liability, they give $1,000 to the scholarship organization, they'll then get $900 in credits. So when they actually do their taxes, they no longer owe $1,000 because the $900 in credits lowers that to $100. And so what literally happens is then the school will ask for those credits in the name of a student, and they will then get those monies to offset the scholarship dollars that they probably have already awarded those families. And those families have to qualify based on income, but it's pretty generous here in Pennsylvania. 90% credit is generous, as well as who can qualify. You can be a family of 4, so 2 parents and 2 kids, and you can make about $140,000 of revenue and qualify for a scholarship.
And is Pennsylvania, that you know of, the only state that has something like that? Because I have never heard of that before.
Yeah, no, there's other states. There's states like, I know Arizona has similar ones. Florida has some like this. I know Missouri has been, I think they have some new ones coming out. So yeah, there's 10 altogether, I think, that have these programs.
Man, and now I got to look it up because I live in Florida and I've never heard of it before. So
Florida is one of the top schools in the nation as it relates to school choice legislation. And really, I'm trying to stop using the word school choice because it's not the school's choice, right? It's parental choice. So the word I'm trying to get used to using is educational freedom.
There you go.
You have the freedom to choose your education, just like you have the freedom of which grocery store you go. You have the freedom of which restaurant you go to on a Friday night. You have the freedom to pick which doctor you want to go to. You have the freedom to pick which place you go and travel to. kids ought to have and parents ought to have the freedom to choose where their kids are educated.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I love the chat about the accreditation side a little bit. So obviously there's different places to get it, your school accredited, and obviously that falls more along the lines of, we're talking just Christian schools that need the accreditation side, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
No, that's right.
What is point? Again, I don't want to be mean or brash. But the point of an accreditation, pros and cons of it. I guess if a school's looking at it, I'm sure there's a cost that goes with it, a stress that goes with it, maybe some handcuffs that possibly come with it. Like, give me let's dive into accreditation a little bit.
Yeah, so I fully support accreditation. I did as an administrator and walked my school through it 3 or 4 different times. I am a part of some accreditation visits, so I'm leading a team up to Erie next fall to walk that school through an accreditation process. Here's why I think accreditation's process. You're absolutely right, Mitchell. Is it more work? Yes. Is it hard at times? Yes. I have probably less hair because of it? Yes. Yes. But I would tell you, here's why it's essential. Essential for 2 reasons. First, it's a continuous improvement process. You're looking at standards for which quality schools meet, and it helps you to take a look in the mirror as a school and go, where can we improve? And it uses an outside party to hold us a bit accountable to making those improvements. And when I say accountable, we don't lose our accreditation over it, but we have to do yearly reports of how we've been progressing in the area that we said we were going to improve on. So it is almost like forced continuous improvement for a school. So I think that's the first reason and probably most important reason. Here's a second caveat reason. Prior to COVID, quite a few Christian schools were closing. In fact, prior to COVID, more private Christian schools were closing than were opening. The ones that were closing were not the accredited schools.
Okay.
For whatever reason, maybe it's level of quality, maybe it's that commitment to continuous improvement, maybe it's the support structure that is surrounding the accredited schools and their agencies, right, and the support that they give, but they weren't accredited schools that were closing. They were mostly non-accredited schools. So little caveat on that. So the main reason is it's almost self-imposed continuous improvement.
Okay. Is there a cost associated with each accreditation that they pay yearly to be a part of it or have it?
Yeah, they're yearly dues. It may be $1,000, $1,500. There's a cost to bring an accreditation team in, so a couple hotel rooms, visits, things like that. It's well worth the cost. And so, yeah.
Okay. And if they don't get it, like a school doesn't pursue accreditation, doesn't do that, do you see any other, I mean, you mentioned some of them obviously closed down that haven't been accredited, but is there, I'm trying to put it in my shoes. I'm like, okay, if I look at a school for if I was enrolling my son, would I go, ooh, they're not accredited by that organization, there must be a bad school, and I leave? Is there that reason come up?
Yeah, Mitchell, I don't go that far.
Okay.
I don't go that far, right? There are plenty of Christian schools, and I work with a handful of them that are not accredited. They're recognized by them, so there's some relationship between the accrediting body, but they haven't walked through the accreditation process. Okay. And I would tell you there's still good education happening. I would never want to fall into the educational snobbery that unless you do this, no good education can come from it. There's a saying that education, I think it comes back in the Plato, Aristotle age, where it went, good education is one person sitting on a stump from another person having a conversation, right? So accreditation's pretty critical. I would tell you teachers are the number one reason kids are successful in the classroom. Now, the dirty little secret about education, so in the 1970s, there was a study called the Coleman study, and they wanted to know what were the factors that led to student success. Well, Coleman does this study. What he found was 8 of the 10 had nothing to do with schools. Had everything to do with parents. Did they attend their children's school events? Did they check homework? Did they eat dinner together? Did they talk about their day together? And so, catch a bias here. So like any good government study that does not support the thesis, it got buried. And Coleman decides to run it independently, and he finds the same things, that the number one factor for student success isn't the school at all. It's the parents. It's the parents in the home in which the student comes from. Now, I would tell you a very close second to that. Give me a great classroom teacher, and I'll show you student success. They are the number one factor once you enter the school building.
Man, and if you can marry those two together, man, like a great family structure and then a great teacher.
Yeah. Yep. And Mitchell, that's really the philosophy behind Christian education. It's this almost three-legged stool is the analogy that my predecessors used to use. And that is, it's kids in a Christian home, kids who attend a Christian church, and kids who attend a Christian school. And that three-legged stool is much more secure to sit on. Yeah. Here's the reality, though. Times have changed. The family structure, maybe some would say, isn't as strong as it used to be. Some might say that our churches maybe aren't as strong as they used to be. I was a history teacher, and I think we're always, the temptation is always to say, oh, it was better back then or worse back then and so forth. And I think we need to be careful of that. But kids come to the classroom struggling these days. Social emotional issues, familial issues, economic issues, learning issues, attention span issues. And so even within the Christian school environment, there are kids with needs. And I think many of our Christian schools have adapted to that and are meeting those needs and helping students achieve and succeed, starting at where they're at, not where we hope them to be, but starting where they're at and walking alongside them.
And just what you mentioned there about you not comparing the old to the new. I know people always say the funny saying, in my day,
Yeah, right.
I think I just heard it I think it was just this past week, the three main things that schools or teachers were worried about back in like the 70s or 60s that were like the big issues students had was running in the halls, chewing gum in class.
They still do that.
And I can't remember the third one. And I was like, eating, like the animal eating the homework or something like that.
Yeah.
And then they said like the three today is like, they're dealing with kids with depression and suicidal thoughts. It's like, man, that's like not even right. They're not even close comparison at all.
Yeah. Well, think of my parents' generation remembers duck and cover, right? So the bells go off, the siren goes off, and you get under your desk, right? The idea that if a nuclear bomb came, somehow being under the desk was going to be helpful, I don't know. But now we do intruder alerts.
Yeah.
Right? Now we lock the door, and if the intruder were to come in, we prepare kids how to be aggressive and to fight back. Right? It's just every generation has a different set of challenges that it has to face.
Yep.
And usually our educational system's right on the front line of that because they're preparing the next generation to deal with not only current life's problems, but the challenges that we're not even aware of yet. This generation will grow up into those. And so
it's a high calling. It is, man.
It is a high calling. And that's why I have the highest regard for our teachers. They are on the front line. There was New York, I think it was a Times Magazine article that had a picture of medical staff on just saying like people of the year because of COVID and pandemic and so forth. And I totally agree with that. I mean, the front line of our medical workers over the last couple of years, just tireless, heroic effort. But I would put teachers close to that. The teachers that I interacted with ran back into the classroom. They knew that in-person education was essential to the well-being of students, both academically and socially, emotionally. And I'll never forget a 73-year-old history had been at the school, is at the school currently still for 40 years.
Wow.
40 plus years, and had every reason to stay at home and do the windows into the classroom and just teach from home. That guy didn't miss a day in a COVID year. He was so committed. When in Pennsylvania, we had to close down for a couple of months, and he did everything he could to learn how to do this virtual stuff. And when I asked him, I said, Bob, why not just, email them the lesson or something? He goes, because it's important that I see my kids and that they see me. And so to me, teachers are heroes. They were heroes, during the COVID years, but they're heroes every year.
Yeah.
Because they come back over and over again to kids who are unfinished products, right? I mean, imagine our middle school years. We wouldn't have been as cleaned up as we are now, right? And they deal with them every single day with love and with hope, and teachers are rock stars.
Shout out to the teachers. I totally agree.
Shout out to the teachers.
Man. Well, I love the accreditation side. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I learned something because I didn't know all those.
Yeah.
All those.
So what I do, Mitchell, I'll just add what I did for that team, and even when an administrator is present, accreditation is such a task. It's kind of like trying to fix an airplane while in flight, right? It's flying, but you're trying to fix it and write reports about it and so forth. So what has been really helpful is I can come alongside an administrator, and having been an administrator, he or she can trust me to work with the faculty, develop teams, write reports, work with the agencies. And so it really becomes a team approach, and they then can operate the school while I'm working on accreditation for them and with them.
Okay, sweet.
So, go ahead, we can switch.
Yeah, no, it's perfect. Well, I love those. Let's dive into some of the other things that come up maybe regularly that you think schools, I guess let me flip it this way. So I typically ask the guests that are on as school leaders, like, what are some challenges that they're up against, as well as what's going really, really good. So I guess from your point of your perspective, what have you seen schools struggling with the most, like the most of the specific challenges that maybe pop up more often than others? And then what your solution might be for some of those challenges that schools may be dealing with right now.
Sure. Well, we briefly talked about one of them, and that is the changing demographics, the changing image of what the students coming in look like, right? What they look like, what their academic abilities are, what their social emotional, their family situations are. And teachers have to adjust. The classroom has gotten a lot more diverse. And by diverse, the moment I say diverse, people go, oh, race. Or, oh, religion. Well, no, I mean just kids are different. They're all over the board. And so teachers really need to adjust for those kids. And so I think professional development is really important, and it's something that schools sometimes struggle with because, again, it's fixing the airplane while in flight. You're operating the school. Oh, by the way, we're going to now focus on training. And so at one school, what I was able to do is lead them through a professional development day. And we approached we called it excellence in teaching, right? So what does excellence look like in teaching? And we used the Danielson model of teacher observations. And the reason we used it was it broke teaching down to all the minute pieces. So if you think of an athlete, right, at the highest level, a pitcher, what's their arm angle, right? Are they at the release point? Are they releasing it too soon, too late, right? There's all these, what's their footwork, right? There's all these nuances at a particular level of sport. Well, there is a teaching too, right? There's the planning, there's classroom management, there's articulating the lesson, there's assessing a child's learning, and you can break all those things down into little bitty pieces. And so in some regards, I mean, here's how talented our teachers are. They do it because of their training. They also do it because they're uniquely gifted. But when you break all those little bitty pieces down, it's like, oh my, you'd have to be an expert in all of them. And they are, most of the time. But there's areas that they can improve on. And so what it does is it helps teachers kind of self-reflect and go, I really do well on the lesson part, but I think I can improve on the assessing. Think about it. When you make a test, when teachers make a test for kids, just the very nature of the question leads to whether you're going to get the answer that you're looking for or that they even know. And so there's just so many nuances. And so that's been fun to help. That's the answer, if you will, to the diversity of kids that they're facing. It is well-trained teachers who can meet individual needs of students. But then, and this is found many times in the private Christian schools, it is this overwhelming partnership with families. See, it acknowledges, if you remember that Coleman study I talked about, it acknowledges that parents play a critical role in the development and success of their kid. In fact, I'm a Christian, and so my view of where kids come from, God put kids in families. God did not put kids in schools. He didn't put them in churches. He didn't put them in governments. He places kids in families. And so families play a pretty critical role. And so this partnership, right, between in my world, the Christian school teacher and the parent, all for the sake of meeting the individual needs of kids. It's a beautiful thing, and it's a recipe for success. And in fact, I would tell you, we've seen some tremendous growth over the last couple years in Christian schools. And I think that's because of, in part, parents feel like, hey, I can have a connection here. I can know the teacher. The teacher's going to reach out to me. We're going to partner together when my kid's having a bad day or when they're having one of their greatest days. We're going to all make up the team that helps my child be successful.
Love this. And if you were to give any advice to the schools listening for them better partner with the families, whether we're talking public schools or private schools, do you have any strategies or ideas for I know you got probably hundreds of students. We have some schools that have over 1,000 students that listen. So maybe it's a different ball game when we're talking about 1,000 different parents.
No, that's right.
How would you say give them some good strategies for them to partner with those families?
First of all, assume nothing, right? And so communicate with parents frequently. Even if it's a general one to your entire class, assume that they don't know what's going on in your class. And it's okay to brag a little. Hey, we just did this mock trial and we put Cortez on trial for some of his actions in the New World and kids were engaging. Parents don't know that. I mean, sometimes kids will go home, hey, guess what I did in school? Most times when a parent asks, what'd you do today in school? Nothing. Well, that's not true. So if a teacher just assumes that the child will communicate the great things they're doing, don't assume it. Tell about it. Brag about it. Brag about your kids. And then the other thing I would say, invite parents in. There's parents that have a lot of different skills and fields. Do a career day. One of the things we did was we called it J-term, but it was a week where we suspended classes. And we made them all focused on careers. And so we would have guest speakers come in. Many of them were parents. Some of them were friends of the school. And from engineers to nurses to pastors to construction businessmen, just a whole wide range of different things. So we tried to broaden our kids' community, right? Here's the reality. Kids don't need more friends. Some actually do, right? Some are struggling with that. So I don't want to disparage that but my point is this. They don't need more friends in their life. They need more adults who are paying attention to them and pouring into their life and are there when things are going well to celebrate with them and there to pick them up when things don't go well. And so I think on a school-wide level, regular weekly communication, many schools do. Sometimes those communications are the kind of like the nitty-gritty things of what's happening during the week. I'd at least do once a month just kind of a whole bragging thing. Your kids are doing wonderful things. The teachers are doing wonderful things. Teams are doing wonderful things. The theater group is doing wonderful things. Just brag and celebrate. We don't celebrate enough, right? Not enough as families, not enough as churches, not enough as schools or classrooms. celebrate a little.
Okay.
We could use a little more celebration.
I love that. And I love the part where you mentioned asking your student, your kid, you're like, hey, what did you do? Nothing, so something my wife and I were trying to do with our 2-year-old is when we pick him up from his little school, he goes to his like, hey, what'd you do today? And he's like, he might say something random. So then we've actually found this list online, and it's huge of all these questions. And of course, you get an answer back. So we say, hey, did you see anybody that was happy today? Or did you see somebody smile today? Yes. Why did they smile?
Great,
just like prompting those conversations. And plus, I want to know what happened during his day. I want to know what he was doing, what he played with. And it's cool. Yeah. He can talk pretty well. So he will say who he played with and, what'd you play? And so it's been fun. So I encourage, I know we have school leaders listening, but maybe there's lists online of sending that to your families. Here's some questions to prompt conversation instead of just saying, oh, they don't want to talk to me. Darn it. They don't have anything to say. I guess school really is boring. No, it's probably not. They just are exhausted and they don't want to talk about it because they probably don't think you actually maybe, I don't know.
Well, and two thoughts. You mentioned questions. When we were talking about teacher development and so forth, one of those little niches is how do you ask the right questions? Even when you're in class, wait for the test. How do I ask a question right now so that I can gauge whether a kid is tracking or whether they understand? But yeah, I was going to say something else, but it slipped my mind.
No worries. Well, two things. It was kind of work to wrap it up. So I got two things for you. I would love to hear a piece of advice or wisdom that you'd want to share with any school leaders. You were there in that realm for a long time, and now of course you're on the consultant side, so that piece of wisdom. And then of course I want you at the end, plug yourself a little bit, how people can get in touch with you if they're looking for hey, maybe they need help with accreditation and they need help on a certain level. I want to make sure they can find and contact you.
Sure. Great. So a bit of advice. I've been in quote unquote the chair for nearly 30 years, and one advice I would give is don't do it alone. Don't do it alone. And so I mean that in two ways. Number one, you may be the leader of the school, but you have a community of teachers, and they'll view the world slightly different than administrators, and that's okay. But don't do it alone. Build teams, be collaborative, seek opinions, even if you know those opinions are going to be different than your own. I told an administrator of mine once, I said, I don't care where you get the information. Get information. It is too easy to think that you know, and you might not know. Now, all the information that may not be accurate, it may not be from the right perspective, whatever. But that's the whole discernment process. But you can't even discern if you don't have the information. So seek information, don't do it alone, involve people. Schools are communities, they're not designed to be solely one person's thing. So that's the one way, don't do it alone. Here's the other way, don't do it alone. Sometimes you are alone as an administrator, and you want to surround yourself with some folks that you can connect with and can be there when you need to bounce an idea off of. When you're struggling or having a bad day, it's hard sometimes to go home and share that with your spouse because they want to understand, but they can't understand. They don't sit in the chair, right? But find a couple other administrators and listen, if you're waiting for a big agency to come in and gather you all together, don't wait. Find the 3 or 4 other private school administrators or even public school administrators in your area and commit to once a semester grabbing lunch together or grabbing a coffee, and do it faithfully once a semester. And because no one's going to do it for you. No one's going to come and say, hey, let's get everyone together. You're going to have to be committed to doing it. And so find a couple of them and say, hey, let's pick a time to get together and just chat. And so that would be the advice. Don't do it alone.
Okay.
Either for yourself or for those you lead.
Love it. And how can people get in contact with you, Phil?
Yeah, Mitchell, they can get in contact with me by email. It's Phil G. Puleo, so PhilGPuleo gmail.com. I'll even give you my cell phone. It's 732-575-9960. Things I work on with Christian schools, we've talked about accreditation, whether you have an administrator or not. I come alongside and I carry the lion's share of the load, partnering with the faculty, working with them and with the administrator to help prepare for accreditation and the upcoming accreditation visit. I do a lot of development work. Some of our smaller Christian schools simply can't afford a full-time development officer. So I come in, I work a little on annual fund, on some campaign things, on the tax credit thing, and I come alongside the administrator and help them raise funds necessary to support their Christian school. One annual fund went from $30,000 to $123,000 in a year. One tax credit went from $0 to $299,000. But I'd be remiss, Mitchell, if I did not say that is not all me. That is a community working together, led by somebody. And I hold this proverb as it relates to development work. While man saddles the horse, it is the Lord that leads to victory. It's a combination of my effort and God's graciousness to the school. I also, for a couple schools, I've come alongside as a leadership coach. And so they both have new administrators coming in. And so I'm spending the year with them kind of as a regular coach, helping them so that that leader is not alone. And that leader can tap 30 years of experience of all kinds of things in private faith-based education. And if I don't know it, which there are many times, I will seek out the resources to help them be equipped so that they can discover those answers. What I love most about what I do is I don't just tell them what to do. Because at times, Mitchell, I don't know. But I become part of their team, another member of their team. But one of the things I committed to doing was not just tell them, hey, this is what you ought to do, but working together, developing a plan and a strategy, but then giving them something that they don't have: time. Most of our administrators don't have time. If they had time, they would have come up with these things themselves. They would have done these things themselves. So not only do I come and become part of that team, but I then do some of the things that we've decided to do. And in that regard, I'm adding to their time. And what they feel like, many of them, they feel like they've multiplied themselves.
Awesome.
And so it's been an absolute blast. I love helping, and I'm passionate about Christian education. And so this has been a perfect combination for me.
Well, thank you for giving up your time today and hopping on the podcast. I learned a ton from you, specifically the accreditation side, so I appreciate you sharing on that. And any school leaders that need somebody to partner up and have help with that, please reach out to Phil. He's a great guy, knows exactly what he's doing. And I wish you nothing but the best, Phil, as you continue to grow and take on this new thing that is consulting after you got out of the school leadership side of it. But wishing you nothing but the best, man. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mitchell, and thanks what you're doing to support educational leaders all over the nation.
Well, another huge shout out and a thank you to Phil for taking time and being on the podcast today. I love what he's doing. I love how he's helping schools, and I'm just wishing him and his business nothing but the best as he continues to grow and help more schools that are out there. And if you're a school that's listening right now and you need help growing your school's enrollment or finding ways to automate the application process that you guys are currently having, hey, please reach out to us. You can find us online, schoolsuccessmakers.com. That's schoolsuccessmakers.com. I would love to hear from you and help your school, whether it's redoing your website, helping you with social media, reviews, any of that stuff. We would love to work with you guys. We love working with schools. You can also connect with us on Facebook and join our private Facebook group just for school leaders called School Success Makers. It's a private group just for school leaders called School Success Makers. I'm personally in there, so I'd love to see you in there as well. We'll be here next week with another amazing guest as usual on the School Success Podcast. We'll see you then.